Let's go into the second segment on Bernie Sanders. And I've told you how big of a Bernie guy I was, being from his neck of the woods. 2016, I don't want to go too much into the weeds in that, but we saw what happened, that Bernie really took off. It seemed like there was a lot more fight in the Bernie Sanders movement and Bernie Sanders himself than in 2020. What do you feel like was different between 2016 and 2020 since you worked on the campaign? You were in the thick of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I didn't work in the 2016 campaign. I was like a super volunteer, right, in the Miami operation. But I spoke with people from the 2016 campaign and the 2020 campaign, and I got sort of like the volunteer view in 2016. I think the infrastructure and the systems were better in the 2020 campaign. Like the organizing was better. Mm-hmm. And the 2016 campaign was largely an accident, right? It just caught fire. Like how I remember watching Bernie like in 2009, 2008 on the Young Turks. Like yes. I was like a high school student. I would get home and like after school I would watch like Young Turks videos on YouTube, and I'd be like, wow, who's this like white guy? He doesn't sound like all the other piece of shit guys. Excuse my language, on Washington D.C.
Yeah, you're good.
Entranced by him. But I think we made a lot of mistakes. I think there was this concept of distributed organizing within the Bernie campaign, that it's basically organizing people at scale, right? And having volunteers sort of like take charge and really lead the operations. And it was really well done. But there was a lack of investment in staff in Super Tuesday states like Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and to a lesser extent, South Carolina, but a much lesser extent, had staff. But the first three staff, and California actually, had a lot of staff investment. And then the rest of the Super Tuesday states were really supposed to be anchored by this distributed program that really put the emphasis on volunteer-run operations. Our volunteers were incredible. Actually, I worked on that department, the distributed organizing department at the national level. But, I always felt that the distributive organizing should have really worked in conjunction with the field staff, right? And we needed a lot more field staff investment to sort of funnel volunteers to them on the ground. So I think that was a huge mistake. I do think that, in terms of just the campaign, like they should have gone harder on Biden, on his record. I think there were a lot of there was a lack of investment on Black outreach, a lot. Like our Latino outreach was fantastic because they invested on organizers, on messaging, on infrastructure, and that same level of investment wasn't there for Black outreach, right? And then lastly, just messaging, right? I think after Nevada especially, I think Bernie should have stopped hitting the Democratic establishment, especially when you're getting into states like South Carolina and things like that, where you have actually a lot of older Black voters that really feel a sense of pride about being, members of local Democratic parties, and they see the Democratic Party as where they, did a lot of their activism post-civil rights and voter registration drives. So I think they felt a little bit attacked by the language that Bernie was using, and I don't think it was particularly culturally competent. I will say, though, that there were a lot of external factors that also led to us losing, like the media relentlessly hitting our campaign, and obviously the fact that, people coalesced to sort of create a coalition that ultimately, brought us down. So it wasn't all our fault. Like our campaign was really good, in my opinion, and what we did was amazing. But we made mistakes too, and there are also things we couldn't control.
Well, I agree with you that you can't control when Barack Obama brings Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Beto O'Rourke all around to go and endorse Joe Biden. You can't control that Elizabeth Warren stays in the race in Massachusetts and quite a few other states where she took a lot of these votes from Bernie Sanders. Let's be realistic. So I agree with you 100%. Why do you think Bernie did so bad in Florida and consistently always kind of did bad in Florida?
Well, a lot of factors. I'll start out by saying the stuff that the campaign did wrong, just because accountability is important. There was lack of investment, right? Like our field director was not hired until I believe mid to late January, which only gave that person about a month and a half to build an operation in a state, in a huge, complicated state. Yeah. Our field director was incredible. His name was Sanjay Patel. Like he did a heroic effort, but he didn't get organizers until he wasn't hired until mid to late January, and he didn't get organizers until a couple of weeks after that. So he was basically alone at the mercy of our distributive department that funneled volunteers to him, but he didn't get staff until weeks after that, a couple of weeks before the primary. So that was big. The campaign really didn't run ads here until a couple of weeks before the primary. There was no presence. There was never a field office really, except for volunteer-run field offices. Like, our volunteers were incredible. Yeah. I also think, our Latino outreach was really sort of centered around like southwestern states like California, Arizona, Texas, and Latinos in Iowa. So sort of like very Mexican centered, right? And we did amazing in reaching out to those folks. But Florida has people from everywhere, right? And there's just so much context and different politics. It's complicated to work in this state. And then, the Castro comments didn't help, whatever you think of what he said. I mean, I think what he said was nuanced, very similar.
Well, Barack Obama said the same thing, Thomas.
But the thing, Obama didn't say it when he was running for president. You know what I mean?
True.
So
yeah, that's true.
Like, you want to, like, I remember when it happened, it was like 3 or 4 days before Super Tuesday, and we were all just kind of like, oh, we don't want to spend the next 3 or 4 days, like talking about this. And then of course, the fact that, like you said, the moderates coalesced, and Super Tuesday, it sucked a lot of oxygen from the campaign. Coronavirus was like sort of coming up in the media. That kind of took a lot of oxygen out of the room. And really, like, Bernie didn't want to go hard against Joe Biden.
Yes.
That's because, from what I've heard, I didn't get a lot of one-on-one time with Bernie. It's like, I just spoke with him a couple of times where he would come and talk with the organizing team. But, from what I heard, Bernie really just did not want to go after Biden because he felt like, I don't want to hurt a potential candidate against Trump. And, whether you disagree with him or not. And Bernie just really sees Trump as the ultimate menace and wants to get Trump out. And he's a decent guy, and he's looking out, for what he sees is like a true, genuine threat to our democracy. So, I think he should have gone harder on Biden.
Yeah.
I think it was a mistake not to, but I respect the reason as to why he didn't do that, because it came from like a really decent place where he was actually putting not me, us into practice, right? In what he believed, right? We can disagree with him, but that's where he was coming at it from.
What do you think's going to happen now with Joe Biden? Do you agree with me that he's probably going to pick Kamala Harris? And do you think that Joe Biden's going to win the election? I'm very scared because it just reminds me of Hillary Clinton 2016, where the polls had her up by 15 points. The polls had her that winning in Texas and Kansas and all these states, and then she loses. What do you think, Thomas?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right. Biden won't even commit to legalizing marijuana, which is like a no-brainer at this point, not only just because it's the right thing to do, but also to stop having so many people get arrested on BS charges, right? Yeah. We've seen 40 million people lost their jobs. This system that ties employment to healthcare has been exposed as a house of cards, right? Like, yeah, Medicare for all makes sense. A lot of people are seeing it now. So yeah, obviously, like, he's beyond not perfect, right? Like, Biden has a lot of issues. I'm going to vote for him just because I think Trump is uniquely like a threat to everything that we stand for as progressives. But yeah, we got to keep pushing Biden, right? Like, he's not perfect, and he's obviously not a progressive, right? He's just not a sociopath, lunatic, fascist. I do think he's going to pick Kamala Harris, unfortunately. I don't know that. So, take that with a grain of salt. Like, I don't know. And who's going to win? I don't know. I have these conversations all the time, and people might ask me. I always say, I'm not a pundit. I'm an organizer. I will say that the polls, in 16, they were within the margin of error in a lot of those battleground states. The polls now look really bad for Trump, but we are like 4 months or so until the election. Like, anything could change. There's voter suppression. Like, a vaccine could come. I don't know. Like, people might.
And what about the debates, Thomas?
The debates, yeah, like Biden's performance on that, like a lot of hinges on that, honestly. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. I just hope that, the Biden campaign gets their shit together and that, they pull through, because I know we wanted Bernie. I worked my ass off 7 days a week, 12-hour days, for 6 months for Bernie. I still love Bernie, but I don't want 4 more years of this. I just don't.
God, no. Yeah, Thomas Kennedy, thanks so much. Let's definitely do this again, though.